This morning, a new development in the Jeffrey Epstein case. A Florida House Republican telling the Palm Beach Post a key figure in the case, Alex Acosta, could be called to testify on Capitol Hill. Acosta was the U.S. attorney in South Florida who oversaw the agreement back in 2008 that allowed Epstein to avoid federal charges. Epstein served only 13 months in state prison for charges concerning his sexual involvement with underage girls. A Justice Department review later found Acosta exercised, quote, poor judgment in striking that deal. Joining us now, CNN senior legal analyst and former federal and state prosecutor Elie Honig. Elie, great to have you here with us. Catch everyone up, remind them, I just went through like the top lines of it, but give us some more details around Alex Acosta's role in all of this.
Right, Jess. So one of the biggest questions here is how did Jeffrey Epstein essentially get away with it the first time back in Florida in 2006, 7, and 8. So Alexander Acosta was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, which includes Miami. His office, the FBI and local police, put together a case where they identified 30 plus underage victims. A prosecutor in Alexander Acosta's office put together a massive federal indictment, which would have subjected Jeffrey Epstein to 10 years to life behind bars. But instead, Alexander Acosta had a series of meetings with Jeffrey Epstein's high-priced, high-powered legal team, including Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz and others. And Acosta ends up agreeing to this outrageous deal where Epstein gets a pass federally and only has to plead guilty to state-level crimes. As you said, Epstein ends up serving 13 months, much of which he's allowed to leave for 12 hours a day to basically hang out at his attorney's office. And in the process, Acosta signs a deal with Epstein that says, we will not prosecute your co-conspirators, which Ghislaine Maxwell is now using to attack her conviction. So this was an inexplicable, inexcusable deal. And if Congress is serious about getting answers, they need to ask some questions of Alexander Acosta.
So that leads me to my second question, which is when you look at the current subpoena list from that committee, what does that tell you that he's not currently on it?
Yeah, if you look at the people who have been subpoenaed, there's about a dozen former attorneys general, former President Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, directors of the FBI. Those folks, if you look at individuals on that list, have a fraction, if anything, of the relevant knowledge that Alexander Acosta has. I'll give you two examples. If you look at the letter that the House sent to Hillary Clinton, one of the reasons it says they need to talk to her is because she hired Jeffrey Epstein's nephew to work on her campaign and then at the State Department. That's a reason for a subpoena. If you look at the subpoena to Jim Comey, the former FBI director, there's no reason given. Jim Comey wasn't even director of FBI during the first or second Epstein investigations. He was the FBI director in between. So compare what those people might have that's relevant knowledge to Alexander Acosta, the guy who gave the case away to Epstein in the first place.
And just a reminder to everyone, we're seeing him with President Trump. He was his labor secretary for a time during his first term. That's why we're seeing them together. Elie, just lastly, if Acosta is subpoenaed, could he fight that? What might he say to that?
Sure, anyone can try to fight a subpoena. They can argue they don't have any relevant testimony, but I don't really see a way out for him. I mean, there's not any type of privilege that he could invoke. There's no executive privilege. I don't think he'd have a Fifth Amendment privilege. I don't think he did anything criminal. So he could try to negotiate for a more limited subpoena, but the fact of the matter is, if Congress wants to get Alexander Acosta's testimony, they almost certainly can. It's just a question of whether they have the political will to issue him a subpoena and then to enforce it.
Yeah. All right. Elie Honig, always good to see you on a Wednesday morning. Thank you so much, Kate.
And on a Thursday and a Friday as well, whenever we can get him. Joining us right now is CNN senior political commentators David Axelrod and Scott Jennings. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, how are you?
Let's start here. So, Scott, this is not Democrats pushing this. This is a Republican Congresswoman who is a strong supporter of the president. And she wants this to happen. She says it's not off the table. She's not letting this go. She's not saying it's a Democratic hoax like the president has said. So what's this going to do?
I mean, they might bring him in. They're bringing in all kinds of other people. So fine with me if they do. And fine with me if they find out things that lead to information gathering that puts other people in jail if they need to go to jail. I don't have any problem with them following the facts where they go here. I mean, the polling on this is a political analysis, is pretty clear. Nobody cares. This is like the least important thing to the American people, and that includes Republicans too. So, but if they want to continue to do their work here, I have no problem.
Why do you think they are continuing it then?
Well, there have been questions about this, and so if you want to talk to folks, I don't know why anybody would be mad about that. But at the same time, I think we shouldn't mistake this for something other than a Washington story, because out in the country, this is not a big deal for the American people.
It's much more than a Washington story, actually, because
that is not what our or any other polling says.
Yes, maybe when you ask a voter what their top issue is, it's not going to be the Jeffrey Epstein saga. But you know that lawmakers have said this is the top call they're getting into their congressional office. They are hearing this when they go home. I asked the top Democrat on oversight, who was on with me last night, about this, and he says Democrats are ready to stand with Congresswoman Paulina Luna if she continues with this move. Let me play this for you.
If she decides to make that motion, or if someone on our side makes that motion and there's enough support, we would support that Congresswoman Luna motion, certainly unanimously. We just want the truth out. And I think, like the Congresswoman, we don't care at the end of the day who gets implicated. We don't care what political party they are or how powerful they are, how much wealth they have. The victims have to get justice, and Alex Acosta is someone that should be testifying in front of the committee.
Makes a strong case for it. My question was, why aren't Democrats shouting from the rooftops about this before this then?
Well, look, I can't speak to why Democrats haven't spoken to this before, but this thing does stay. I agree with Scott, by the way. I think people are worried that their costs are going up, that the job market is tightening, and
I'm not trying to
all
argue
kinds of other things.
About that.
But this thing stinks, and it gets more and more smelly as time goes on. If Acosta, who knows, as Ellie described, so much about the genesis of all of this, is not called, I think that's just going to accelerate the suspicion that there's a cover-up going on. So, now Luna has opened up this possibility. People are going to wonder why it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Tonight, a Republican congresswoman from Florida says that a former federal prosecutor, Alex Acosta, who decided back in 2007 not to prosecute Jeffrey Epstein on federal sex trafficking charges, can still be called to testify before the House Oversight Committee. Now, back then, Acosta was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, and later was in President Trump's first-term cabinet, where he served for a short time as Secretary of Labor. Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna tells the Palm Beach Post that even though Acosta is not currently on the committee's witness list, calling him is not off the table. Acosta worked out a deal with Epstein's defense lawyers that resulted in Epstein pleading guilty to low-level prostitution charges. He served only 13 months in a minimum security prison in Palm Beach. Joining me now, CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig, former federal prosecutor. In your view, how important would it be to hear from Acosta?
In my view, Alex Acosta is one of the true villains in this case. And if Congress is serious about getting the truth and accountability, he should be first on their witness list. So Acosta, as you said, was the U.S. Attorney, chief federal prosecutor in the Southern District of Florida, which includes Miami. The local police, along with his prosecutors and the FBI, put together a case they bring to him with 36 identified child victims.
He had a prosecutor who I think brought like 60 wanted to bring like 60 charges.
A prosecutor based on that drafts a 60 count indictment, federal indictment, which would have included sex trafficking charges, which would have had Epstein, if convicted, locked up for a minimum of 10 years and probably closer to the maximum of life. With all of that evidence, Acosta decides to give Jeffrey Epstein a non-prosecution agreement, meaning you don't have to plead to anything federal, you just have to plead to these minor state charges. As you said, Epstein ends up doing 13 months. During that time, he's spending 12 hours a day on work release, scare quotes here, because he's at his attorney's office, something called the Florida Science Foundation, which, by the way, did not advance any science and was disbanded as soon as his sentence was done. It's an injustice.
And did Acosta ever face any consequences or any?
Barely. There was an OPR, there was an ethics review by DOJ done years later that said, well, he should have handled things better. It's a softball report. But another thing that Acosta has to answer for, he mistreated victims. That report by OPR, by the Justice Department, found that Acosta in his office affirmatively misled.
They lied to victims.
Yeah, because they
saying we're not going for. We're saying we're we're still working on this case when in fact they'd already they were pursuing the deal.
Exactly right. The ink was already dry on this sweetheart deal that they had given Epstein, and Acosta's office reaches out to these child victims and says things are still pending. Please be patient. And later that report found that was affirmatively misleading. One other detail about that deal that Epstein got, Part of that deal that's truly outrageous is Acosta said, not only are you, Jeffrey Epstein, going to get this passed, we also promise that your co-conspirators will never be prosecuted. And guess what's happening with that now? That is the hook that Ghislaine Maxwell is using to challenge her conviction. She's trying to get the Supreme Court to take that right now. So again, that's on Acosta. He has serious questions to answer.
Yeah. Elie Honig, thanks very much. Appreciate it.